The main point of the Maamar until now, the Rabbi explained the whole significance of the Geirel of Purim. Why the Geirel is the central theme of Purim. Why did Haman want to make a Geirel? And the general explanation was that Haman wanted to be able to overpower the Eden, to destroy the Eden, and he knew that from the levels of Ishtalshalos, from the levels of Elikos that recognize good and evil, he's always going to come out being evil, and the Eden are always going to be good, and he'll never get a license to do anything bad to them. In order to be able to be successful in his scheme, he knew he has to reach higher than Ishtalshalos. He has to reach the level of Geirel, that the level of Geirel, which is when there's an inability to choose between two options, represents a level where there's equality, where everything is equal because you're higher than getting into the petty calculations. And there, Haman might be able to have the upper hand against Eden. There's actually a story, I think, with the Tzemach Tzedek, that's just the same idea as the Maamar. The Tzemach Tzedek was a child, and he came home once and he asked the Alter Rebbe, when the Alter Rebbe asked him about what he was learning about, or maybe it was before Purim, and he said he doesn't understand why did Haman have to make the gallows 50 amas high. Was Mordechai so tall that he needed 50 amas to be able to hang him? And later the Alter Rebbe said a Maamar explaining this concept, that Haman saw that in order to have the ability to do what he was trying to do, he has to reach the high level of 50, higher than Ishtalshalos. And in the end, that was the source of his downfall. So the Rebbe explained at length how Geirel is this level that's higher than Ishtalshalos. Geirel is the level where everything is equal. And now the Rebbe started in Eis Ches explaining that there's something similar to Geirel. Geirel is where there's two choices that, from what you can see, they're even, and the person has to throw a lot. He has to use the force of the Geirel to allow him to make a determination, to choose one over the other. There's also the idea of Bechira Chavshis. Free choice, which is the basic foundation of Yiddishkeit, also represents the same idea. Where is there a true free choice? Where is there true Bechira Chavshis? When there's no rational calculation that should push me to one side over the other. When there's two options that are equal, and I have to use the Bechira that comes from my neshama in order to say that this is what I want, and this is what my seichel is going to conform with, agree with, and this is what I'm going to do. So Bechira has also, similar to Geirel, that ability to go beyond seichel, beyond ratzin, beyond any of my keiches pnimiyim and my keiches makifim, and make a determination where the person's being, where the person's faculties didn't allow for such a determination. Similar to Geirel. And the Rebbe said, however, that Bechira is deeper than Geirel. Geirel is the level of the neshama where I can't make a choice, where there's no ratzin, there's no seichel. I have to fall on something outside of me. Geirel is where I use a force that's separate from the person to go and influence the person that I should go and do whatever came out in the Geirel. Whereas Bechira is I'm accessing a deeper level within my own neshama. The Bechira Chavshis is that with my very essence, I make the choice, and that becomes what I want, that becomes what I'm doing. So this difference, the Rebbe is basically explaining now, that these are two levels in the neshama. The level of Geirel is a level that has a limitation. It's constrained in the fact that it's not able to get beyond this equality. Geirel is the aloofness of the neshama, right? That's what Haman wanted. It's the level of higher than Ishtalshalos. Higher than Ishtalshalos is not able to distinguish between good and bad, between light and darkness. Everything is the same. In the palace of the king, he brought shmamis biyadayim to titafes. Everything is overlooked. In that level of Geirel, it's a level that can't get beyond that. We can't undo that. I can't be able to make myself able to make the distinction, because everything is equal and I'm stuck with that. Bechira is higher, that it's true, it's even deeper in the nefesh, but it's so deep that the person is able to say, no, I will make a distinction. Even though I'm so high and everything seems equal, I'm going to find the difference. This is good, this is bad, this is what I want, this is what I don't want, this is what I'm choosing. V'yesh leimar, you could say, the bebchira, 'de bebchira yeshnam shnei ha'inyanim. In bechira, contains both of these levels of the neshama. Hadarga de nefesh shalamayla miseichol shalagaba shnei hadvarim heim b'shava. There's the level of the nefesh where everything is equal. The geirel, the level that has to turn to some outside force in order to make the choice, that's there in the process of bechira. Dargas hageirel, the level of the neshama that we call geirel. And then in Bechira, I went even deeper. I didn't stay there. I went deeper to my neshama where I'm able to say, no, I'm going to make a distinction even though there's seemingly no way to make a distinction. That the person makes a choice however he wants, even though he doesn't have a reason to want one over the other. Even though both choices are equal to the person, because that's the definition of Bechira. That comes from the etzem hanefesh. So to speak, by the Eibishter, what we're saying is, there's a level of geirel, there's a level of godliness that over there everything is equal. Im chatasa matifol ba you do averis, it makes no difference. You do mitzvahs, it makes no difference. So there's no way that the Eibishter should choose, so to speak, one over the other. And Haman wanted to access that level and say, why should the Yidden get the upper hand? We're all the same. But then there's the etzem of the Eibishter, which there's even more of a reason that there shouldn't be any distinctions. But the etzem of the Eibishter chooses arbitrarily that I want the Yidden, I want Teiro mitzvahs, and that level of Bechira says, I don't have to be standing in a removed, in a detached, in a aloof way where I don't see any differences. I'm going to choose with my very etzem that I am going to see a difference and I'm going to choose Yidden. That's the level of Bechira. So what Bechira does is then it comes down that even in the level of my nefesh, which we call Geiro, even the level of my neshama, which in and of itself is kind of constrained, it's limited, it's forced into not being able to make a distinction. The level of Geirel is not able to make a distinction, but when I access deeper in the neshama, the level of Bechira, and I say my etzem, my neshama is going to choose, that choice influences the level of Geirel. That also becomes part of that choice. That even the level of Geirel, the level of higher than Ishtalshalos, that's beyond being able to make a distinction, is part of the choice, is now distinguishing and is choosing good, is choosing Yidden.
It doesn't sound like a choice. It sounds like you're compelled because your etzem and the nefesh is choosing this one and not that one.
Wait.
And also use the word arbitrary. Arbitrary sounds like the roll of the dice.
Probably the wrong word. It's choose arbitrary. It's not because of any reason. Why does the Eibishter choose Yidden? Because the Eibishter he chose to choose Yidden. Just like when we choose the true Bechira Chavshis, is there isn't anything that's forcing it. The force that you said in the Geirel, in the Geirel now it's being forced, so to speak. In the Geirel it's a result. The Geirel wasn't able to make any distinction. In the level of Geirel, everything is still equal. And yet, because deeper than the Geirel in my Etzem and Neshama, by the Eibishter's Etzem, Yidden are the upper ones, Yidden are the better ones. So now the level of Geirel senses that and accepts that and follows that through also.
Why the word Bechira now? So what does that have to do with Bechira? If
Why is that?
Etzem and nefesh says this is what I'm dedicated to.
In the Etzem and Nefesh is saying that why? In the level of Etzem and Neshama, there's also no difference between good and bad. In the Etzem of the Eibishter, there's no difference between Yidden and Goyim, even less of a distinction than there is in Geirel. The higher you go, the more everything is equal. If we're flying in a plane, everything looks...
And the Bechira part of it?
Yet the Eibishter choose, so therefore the Bechira, that's what I mean, arbitrary. It's just choice. There's no reason for it. But the Eibishter chose that he's choosing Yidden, he's choosing Teiro mitzvahs, he's choosing light. That's what the definition of Bechira is. That level where there's no reason at all, but it's the choice of the Etzem and Neshama. L'mayla by the Eibishter, it's the choice of the Eibishter. Yeah? Is that good? V'idei ha-Bechira hamshacha meya etzem, la darga de geirel, la darga shalagaba shnei advarim hein b'shava. Through this, gam ha-geirel, even the level of geirel, hagam shemitzad atzmai efsher liyis b'shnei ha'yifanim, even though geirel, in and of its own, the level of geirel by definition means it's not able to be on one side over the other because it can't so to speak, see a difference between one side over the other. The Geirel comes kefi ha-bechira, it follows what the choice was in that level that's deeper than Geirel. Which is really, that's the ness of Purim, which that's the whole point. Haman had made a very, very accurate calculation. He said, let me get to the level of Geirel, and now the Yidden are in no way better than me. In the level of Geirel, in the level of Elikus that's higher than the world, there's no Torah mitzvahs, there's no good and bad. So there's nothing that gives Yidden more credibility than me. What happened? Here the Yidden access Bechira, and we'll say soon how they access Bechira. Bechira is the etzem of the Eibishter that's also higher than Ishtalshlos, but the Eibishter there chooses Yidden over Goyim. The Eibishter chooses good. And when that level of Bechira comes into play, so then the Geirel that Haman was depending on, which would be for his benefit, becomes against him. Because even the level of Geirel then goes according to the choice of the Bechira that Yidden are good. Valderech Mashakasav, this idea that the Bechira influences the position of the Geirel, this idea is contained in the pasuk Ata Taimich Geirali. You hold up my Geirel. Ata, you the Eibishter, you support the level of Geirel. Sha'akadosh Baruch Hu Taimich es HaGeirel. He holds up the Geirel itself, Shayiyah, that even the Geirel, the level of Geirel, which really shouldn't be taking any sides, because it's not able to take sides, it doesn't see any sides, but through the Ata, through this choice of the Etzem HaNeshama, even the Geirel is Kefi Bechiras HaAtzmos. And that's what happened, that Haman ended up getting hung where? On this gallows that was 50 ames, the level of higher than Ishtalshos that he thought is going to be backing him, is going to be helping him, that was his downfall. That was what Alter Rebbe had said to the Tzemach Tzedek. That the Geirel itself is Kefi Bechiras HaAtzmos. Zeu Mashakasav, this is what the Pasuk says, Yivchar lanu es nachlaseinu es ga'in Yaakov. That Hashem should choose our portion, the glory of Yaakov. The B'Yaakov Ksiv, what is this choosing Yaakov? The B'Yaakov Ksiv, Yaakov Chevel Nachalase. It says in the Pasuk, Yaakov is the Chevel of the portion of the Eibishter. What's Chevel? V'tirgim unklos Yaakov Adav Achsante. The Adav hu Geirel, he's the Geirel of the Nachla of Hashem. Yaakov is the Geirel of Hashem. When it says Yivchar lanu es nachlaseinu, that means Hashem is choosing the Geirel of Yaakov. That's the idea that we said before in the Maamar, the choice of the Eibishter, so to speak, the etzem of the Eibishter chooses Yidden, that affects and influences the Chevel Nachalasai, the level of Geirel, that also the level of Geirel is supporting Yaakov. V'inyan Yivchar es Ga'in Yaakov. This is the idea of this pasuk. Yivchar lanu es Ga'in Yaakov. Shegam bedargas haGeirel shalamayla mishtal shlos shahakil shavim sham. That even in the level of Geirel, which according to reason shouldn't see any differences between one side and the other side, over there everyone is equal. HaBechira hi b'Yisrael dafka through the Yivchar lanu. Through accessing, through bringing down, drawing down the level of Bechira that comes from the essence of the Eibishter as Ga'in Yaakov, Chevel Nachalasai, that causes that even the level of Geirel, the level of Elikus that should be completely impartial, sides with Yaakov.
It's connected to the Yid. Once the Bechira is done, how father chooses a child. Is there really choice? The father and the child are one.
Correct.
There's no choice.
Correct.
So where's the word Bechira come in?
1 second. The father and the child are one, right? Why is the Eibishter one with Yidden? But that's the Eibishter's choice. That's where after the Eibishter chose us, now we have this mashal of a father and a son. So Haman made this plan, and he's going to go to Geirel. Hipul pur hu Geirel. The whole miracle of Purim was that the Geirel turned out to be for our benefit. The question in the beginning of the Maamar was, why are we calling the Yontif Purim? The lot, the Geirel that Haman made seems to be incidental, not central. He says, no, that's the whole story of the Yontif. Haman tried to reach higher than Ishtalshos, where Yidden could be defeated, and over there he ended up being defeated. V'zeu, this is what the pasuk says. Al Kein Karu layamim ha'ele Purim al shem ha'pur. That the Yontif, these days are called Purim because of the Pur. Shanefila, the Yontif was, the Nes was, the miracle that we're marking is Shanefila Sagairel Lamaila, that the Gairel, the level of Gairel, the way it is and what it represents, the levels of higher than Ishtalshalos, where there could have been other outcomes, Haisa turned out to be Kifi Kavanas Bechiras Ha'atzmos, according to what the choice is deeper than Gairel, according to what the Eibishter himself chooses with Bechira, that influences the Gairel. Meaning, Dagam Sha'ach Esav Liyakev. It says in the pasuk, Hale'ach Esav Liyakev. Behold, Esav and Yaakov are brothers. Va'oyev es Yaakov. Hashem says, but I love Yaakov. The pasuk says, even at that level where Ach Esav Liyakev, there's a level that's higher than Ishtalshos, that there truly Yaakov and Esav are equal. There's no advantage, there's no virtue in mitzvahs over Averis. And nevertheless, the Bechira, bringing in the influence of the Bechira, causes that even at that level where they should be equal, the Eibishter says, I love Yaakov. Just because the Eibishter loves Yaakov. That's the level of Bechira. What caused that the Bechira should come into play then? The Eibishter chose Yidden, but that's a level of the Etzem of the Eibishter. Usually in Geirel, which is a Lakustas Lamayla Meishtalshalos, when you're at that level, what's felt is the Geirel. You don't feel the Bechira. There had to be something that, so to speak, brought about that by the Nes of Purim, the influence of the Etzem, the influence of the Bechira should be felt, should be present, so that the Geirel should be changed.
That sounds like Seichel.
What?
That sounds like Seichel. The Eibishter says, I'm impressed, therefore I'll pick this.
No, because it's not something that you could be impressed by. It's something that is Sarusa de Lasata, Sarusa de Leila. When we're living and serving the Eibishter at that level, so then we connect with that level. We connect with the Etzem. When we draw from our Etzem, so the Eibishter deals with us with his Etzem, that the Etzem influences the Geirah. What was the Avodah of Yidden that accessed their Etzem was Mesiras Nefesh. Because Mesiras Nefesh is that Bechira that comes from the Etzem and Neshama and the Avodah of Yidden. Idea Mesiras Nefesh to Yisrael b'meshech kol hashana. Through that Yidden had Mesiras Nefesh for an entire year, like the Alter Rebbe says, and all the Maamarim bring down that by Purim the Yidden spent an entire year of Mesiras Nefesh. Because until the actual war, nobody could be 100% certain what the outcome is going to be, if Achashverosh is going to flip-flop again or anything. Through the Mesiras Nefesh, the Inyan Mesiras Nefesh, who may Etzem HaNeshama, the Mesiras Nefesh comes from the Etzem HaNeshama of Yidden, Hainu Mitzada Bechira, the Etzem HaNeshama Ba'atzmos. Mesiras Nefesh is an expression of that in our level, in our Etzem HaNeshama, we choose Dafke the Eibishter, and therefore we'll sacrifice anything and disregard anything else. This brought out the level of Bechira of the Eibishter, the way the Eibishter chooses Yidden, and therefore that influences Geirah. And this caused the nest that even the level of Geirah that Haman was reaching also turned out to be for Yidden's benefit, and and Haman was hung on the gallows. Let's just see a ha'ara before we continue this. Ha'ara 69. Even though I'm not sure what the answer is going to be, but so we'll just put it on the table. The Rebbe asks over here, so he said, Mesiras Nefesh is Bechira. Bechira is the Etzem HaNeshama. It's the level where you're not forced, you're not compelled, you have no reason, there's no Seichel Dika argument, there's no rationale. It just comes because the Etzem HaNeshama chooses. Like we said about the Eibishter. The Eibishter chooses Yidden. There's no reason over there, there's no advantages or disadvantages. So the Rabbi said, what is that in the Avodah of Yidden is Mesiras Nefesh. Mesiras Nefesh comes from the fact that Bechira Chavshes, the Etzem HaNeshama, freely and like arbitrarily chooses to give ourselves over completely from the Eibishter. This seems to be at odds with what everybody knows, that Mesiras Nefesh is described as a Yid nishter vil and nishter ken sein ageteilt von Havaya Echad. Mesiras Nefesh is that level where we seemingly have no choice. comes to Mesiras Nefesh, then everyone is Meser Nefesh because he can't do otherwise. He's not able to be kafir to deny the Eibishter. So how does that seems to be the opposite of Bechira. How are we saying over here that Mesiras Nefesh is an expression of the Bechira of the Etzem Neshama? So the Rebbe brings over here, Hara 69, Tanya Seif Perek Yudches, that's the source of this expression. The Alter Rebbe says, She'i efsher lichver ba'avaya echad. It's impossible for a Jew to be kafir in the Eibishter. It's impossible for a Jew to go against and deny the Eibishter. He can't behave otherwise. Umevur b'makim acher, elsewhere we say, what does that mean? The kivan shemesiras nefesh hu gilui hayechida. Since Mesiras Nefesh comes from, so to speak, the Yechida being activated, it's from the Yechida Shebenefesh coming into play. She'ein kenegda lu'umazeh. In the level of Yechida, there's no lu'umazeh. Bevoya de bevoya leisluhu. It brings down, we had it, I think, in a different Maamar. It says that if someone sees a person in the distance, and the person says, I am so-and-so, and I'm in very hazardous health, I want you to give my wife a get. So he identifies himself, so the people who listen, the two agents, they can go and give his wife a get. So the Gemara asks, how do you know? Maybe it's not a person, maybe it's a shed, it's a spirit, and it's just in the image of a person. It says they have a way of determining that it's a real person. If it has a shadow, then it's a person, it's not just a spirit. So the Gemara asks, what do you mean? You see that Shadim could also have a shadow. So the Gemara says, oh, but this person that's said to give a get, it has a shadow and a double shadow. The shadow has a shadow. By Shadim, they could sometimes have a shadow, but Bevoya de Bevoya Leislu, their shadow doesn't have a shadow. By a human being, he has a shadow, and the shadow has a shadow. That's a halacha that the Gemara says. So Chassidus says, what does that mean? Shadow is makif. Every person has his keches pnimiyim, and we have a makif, higher keches. We have what's deeper part of our neshama. And then there's bevoya de bevoya, the makif harachik, which is yechida. There's chaya, which is makif hakariv, the shadow, and there's the makif, which is yechida. Yechida, that etzem neshama. Klippa could also have a makif, which means there could be negative things in Inyane Elam Haza, where we could have this overpowering rutzin, irrational desire that I want to go do things that are bad. That's makif. So it could also use this keiches makifim. Bevoya de bevoya, the idea of yechida, that there's nothing else that exists, this is everything, this is only there in Kedusha. There's no bevoya de bevoya in Klippa. According to that, says Chassidus, when the Yechida is revealed, when Yechida comes into play, automatically the person is Meiser Nefesh, because in the level of Yechida nothing else exists. There's no Klippa, there's no Lu'umasa, there's no other options, there's no alternatives. Therefore, when the Yechida becomes revealed, so that results in a Mesiras Nefesh in a manner he can't behave otherwise, because at that level there isn't any alternatives. There isn't any other existence. He says, Avo, Mikivan she'inyin ha'bechira, hu omud ha'teira v'ha'mitzvah. Says the Rebbe, so it seems that Mesiras Nefesh is not connected to Bechira. Mesiras Nefesh is the level where I don't have alternatives. Bechira is when I have choices that are completely indistinguishable one from the other, and I have to use my free choice. It says, but that's what it seems like, but we have to say otherwise. Because we know that Bechira is the foundation of Torah. So it must be in every part of our Torah mitzvahs, there's the element of Bechira. So I can't say that when it comes to Mesiras Nefesh, suddenly it's devoid of Bechira. Does it make sense? Since the Rambam says Mesiras Nefesh is Omer HaTeira v'Mitzvah Bechira, and Bechira is Mi'ikre Mailas Aveda San. The main Maila of our Aveda is the fact that we do the Aveda with Bechira. So it must be that Mesiras Nefesh is not absent of Bechira. How does it fit? Tzarech Leimar. You have to say, this itself that I say that at the level of Yechida you can't behave otherwise, that Yechida doesn't have the ability to be otherwise, there's no alternative, that itself is a choice of Yechida. It's not that the Yechida is, so to speak, forced into that. it's so to speak, that the yechid, the level of yechida, the person chooses the Eibishter, but that choice is such a powerful choice that it removes any other alternatives. Yeah, is that what it says, more or less? Needs a lot more explanation, but I think we have to finish it. What? Of the etzem and neshama, the level of the neshama at that level of yechida. In other words, the neshama at the level of yechida made a choice. It's a choice that's different than other choices. It's a choice that creates this circumstance, that reality that ef sheli is acheres, but at its root, it's a choice. So on that note.